Welcome to this edition of Safety First. I'm your host, Tim Kelly. Today we're going to be talking about Distracted Driving Awareness Month, which is coming up this month, April 2019. And to cover this very important topic, we have two members of the Suffolk Police Department joining us today. We have Lieutenant Jeffrey Lurie and Sergeant Raul Hudson to talk about this. So gentlemen, when we talk about distracted driving, in a very basic sense, and I know the title gives it away, but what are we talking about when people, literally are not paying as much attention on the roadway as they can or need to, but there's the law and there's really what they should be doing just to remain safe, right?
Well, it all starts when these young kids go to driving school and they're getting ready to get their license, and everybody has devices now. Everybody has tablets and phones and the smart watches, and now even your car has the navigation screens and things like that.
Right.
It's not just the electronics that are in the vehicles, but you drive down the streets every day all over the country, and you see somebody eating their lunch or reading the newspaper or fixing makeup or whatever they're doing when they're driving down the street.
Right.
It's really important to remember that when we're on the roadways driving, that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be driving and paying attention to the rules of the roadway.
I think it's kind of scary when you think about the fact of things that people do in their car when they're operating it.
Right.
Sometimes if you're on a highway, obviously you're going a decent rate of speed. Heck, even if you're in your neighborhood driving, 25 or under, or whatever the speed limit is marked in that neighborhood. And speaking of neighborhoods, correct me if I'm wrong, statistics I think tend to show that people, or most accidents happen within a certain proximity of their home.
Right.
And is that just like sort of you're comfortable, you're not thinking about what you're doing, you're thinking about getting home and doing whatever right that, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're closer to the home, started to relax. That's when you let down your guard and things will happen.
Correct. And of course you take that and throw in electronics or other distractions that are built into the environments that we've created with ourselves.
Absolutely.
You talked about smartwatches, iPads, or phones. GPSs, exactly. I mean, anything.
And it's interesting. People tend to actually pay a little bit more attention when they're lost or when they're trying to find what the directions the GPS are telling them to go because they may have missed a turn.
Correct.
And you find that a lot of the Virginia state codes actually exempt the use of GPS as one of the violations.
Right.
And although it may not be against the law to use your GPS, and there may be some exemption to that, but it's really a safe practice to just pull over to the side of the road, pull into a parking lot, somewhere safe where you're able to focus on finding that point of interest or fixing your directions, and then go from there to your final destination.
Now, a lot of people may be confused or just not know what the law is when it comes to, we'll just take phones, cell phones specifically, to what you can and can't do while operating a car legally. And again, there's the safety factor, but legally in a general sense or specific sense as the case would be, what are we talking about? What is allowable, and really more specifically, what is not?
Well, you're allowed to do things like answer your phone. What you can't do though is FaceTime or read your emails, even text messages. Those things will now lead to the distracted driving.
Correct.
It takes time to sit there reading a message, and that's what leads to fatalities and everything else that comes along with that.
And so there's all kinds of different features that phone companies and auto manufacturers have employed to try to make these devices safer. Right. And the sales pitch, of course, is that they're trying to make it safer. That doesn't necessarily make it safe.
Correct.
So you may have things like voice commands. Well, you may be able to tell your phone or your car, hey, send a text message to so-and-so. Hey, call so-and-so. Find the local coffee shop. But even having to just think about that and to push a button to start the command or to say the commands and look at the screen to make sure that they got that message correctly, it's not fail-proof. So, we find that the more stuff that people put in their car to distract them while they're driving, there's a much higher likelihood that they're going to get in a crash. And we tend to focus, especially with the trends of electronics and technology, we focus on that. But things as simple as a student who's proud that they just graduated from high school and they're ready to go to college, and they hang their little graduation tassel on their rearview mirror, or the handicap placard, or a party favor of some sort. when those things are hanging from the rearview window, rearview mirror rather, those can be a distraction. They're moving as people are driving, and that's a violation of Virginia State Code to have those things hanging from the.
Didn't even think about that aspect of things, but that good point. And I think you can certainly literally have your eyes on the road, but if your mind is somewhere else, you're distracted. Exactly. I mean, you're looking ahead. Yeah, okay, fine, but you're not actively looking.
Right.
Your mind is, as we talked about, if you're doing a voice command and you're dictating a message there, okay, fine. Yeah, you're I guess sort of hands-free, but sort of not. But again, it's where your focus is mentally, perhaps more so than anything else. Correct?
Right.
Yes.
Yes. So when y'all are out patrolling, you and the other men and women of the department are patrolling roadways here in Suffolk, what are some of the things y'all are looking for to see? I mean, how can you tell a distracted driver? I mean, obviously they got the phone in their hand. That's a telltale sign. But I mean, there's some signs and things that y'all look for to go, we might have an issue here?
If I'm behind someone
right.
and you're weaving all over the roadway, that's a telltale sign that you're probably distracted somehow.
Sure.
Whether it be you've been drinking or something of that sort. That's all part of distracted driving.
Got it.
So.
And we talk about distracted driving, and I think we mentioned earlier in the segment about the fact that with teens, and certainly a new driver who is unfamiliar with roads, where to go logistically, or just operating a vehicle and being comfortable in there, that's one aspect of things. But then as we all get a little older, we think, I got this. I can take care of this. I can multitask. I can have, the burrito in one hand, the phone in the other. I'm driving with my knee. I know bells are going off right there, and that's all no-nos. But I mean, this is for adults as much as we're talking about teens, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, driving distracted is in many cases just as bad as driving intoxicated. Yes. And we in Suffolk have specialty officers trained in DUI enforcement. Right. And when officers look for those signs of what is an intoxicated driver doing, it's the things like not turning their high beams off because they're not familiar with the depth perception that their lights are providing when they're coming into oncoming traffic. Right. Things like not using a signal when they're changing lanes, swerving all over the roadway. Those are things that you may find yourself doing while you're texting or while you're talking on the phone or while you're eating that sandwich. Correct. And those are things that they're striking indicators to police officers, and they say, "Oh, wait, there's something going on here." Correct. And it'll attract our attention, and we're going to pay close, focus on that, and we're going to say, "Hey, what's going on with this car? Why is it swerving?" Right. And if we see a cell phone in their hand or whatever the case may be, just merely crossing over the marked lanes of the roadway is a violation, and you can be stopped for that. Got it.
Now, if you're out on the roadway, civilian. So I'm out driving around, and you see someone, and we've all seen them. People are texting, or they're looking here, they're not looking there, or they're just you can tell they're distracted. Do you want us to call to say, hey, there's someone driving on the roadway? I know obviously you have to someone has to be there at the moment. Right. But what do y'all prefer for residents to do when we see people who are operating a vehicle in an unsafe manner?
Call us.
Okay.
Call the non-emergency number if you can.
Okay.
We get that a lot. That's not something most people know about, apparently, but absolutely, you should definitely call us. Okay. Because you don't know what's going to end up happening. You may end up saving that person's life. Correct. Or your own.
That's right.
So.
Or family members.
That's right.
And one thing to piggyback on Sergeant Hudson is when you do call the police because you've seen a reckless driver or somebody who is all over the roadway, and they appear distracted or intoxicated, then make sure that you provide the dispatcher your name and your callback information. Right. And if you do need to stop for some reason, to tell the officer more information or to provide some type of statement to the officer. Correct. Follow the instructions that dispatch provides as far as pulling over in close proximity to the vehicle stop, because the officer may not know what vehicle you're driving. Correct. And they may not know why you're approaching that traffic stop, and that creates a safety issue for the officer. Sure. So we want to make sure that dispatch will provide instructions to those callers, and we want to make sure that they just comply with those instructions to keep everyone safe.
Gotcha. And we talked about technology. I want to jump back to that for a second. I know vehicles now have a lot of controls that are on the steering column itself.
Yes.
So obviously, instead of reaching for the radio, you have the volume control, or if you're changing the source or whatever, you've got that here. But again, yeah, it's at your fingertips, but you're not paying attention, or you're not paying full attention, I should say, to the roadway and really what's going on around you. I mean, certainly using the mirrors properly, being aware of safe distances between you and the car in front of you, the car behind you, cars on the side, what's kind of going on with that is really what you need to be focused on, the environment you're in, correct?
Correct.
Well, we have thousands of things going through our mind every day.
Sure.
What time do I pick up the kids? What am I making for dinner tonight?
Right.
Where did I put my glasses? There's all kinds of stuff going on in people's minds.
Sure.
And when you add cell phone use to that, and you add playing with radio controls, and you add even, if you spill your coffee in the car, leave your coffee.
Right.
Pull over to the side of the road and handle it in a safe manner.
Mm-hmm.
Something as simple as picking up a coffee that might be hot, and you get that quick,
Right.
Oh, my coffee's hot, may
Right.
distract you to the point where you run off the road or you hit somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so important to pay attention when you're driving.
And I would even say it goes probably as far as during the winter months. We have a frost or snow or whatever on our car. We don't probably clear off the car the way we should. We don't defrost everything. Well, I've got this one peephole that I'm staring through. That's good enough for me to drive down the roadway. Mm-hmm. But you're putting something that, again, is going to distract you and prevent you from having really full grasp of your senses when you're operating that motor vehicle in a safe manner, correct?
And believe it or not, that's actually a violation of law.
Right. Yeah.
To have your windshield obstructed.
Mm-hmm.
It would be the same as if your windshield was tinted.
Right.
And you couldn't see through it.
Correct.
You have to make sure that during those seasons of ice and snow,
Right.
You're scraping them off, or if the trucks that have mud all over them, you want to make sure that you get all that off the window. Right. So you can see where you're going.
Good point. Now, when it comes to, we talked about GPSs a little bit earlier. I know certain cars might be outfitted with DVD players and things like that, but you can't have that outfitted in the front.
Correct.
You need to have that for the rear passengers, correct?
So any manufacturers,
Right.
Any manufacturers and aftermarket installation companies, they're supposed to connect a safety feature so that the vehicle has to be in park.
Got it.
In order for any screen forward of the driver to function for something other than GPS.
Right.
When you see these newer vehicles with the entertainment systems, they're rear of the driver.
Correct.
You can't have any motion picture device forward of the driver. And like Sergeant Hudson mentioned earlier, that includes things like FaceTime
Right.
and Snapchat. And you don't even need to be communicating with somebody. It could be watching a YouTube video.
Correct.
And that's enough that, one, it's a violation, and two, it's just plain unsafe.
Yep. So, I guess the general thing is, okay, so let's give an example. And again, we're talking about, I'm not going to make you guys lawyers today, but sort of how the law reads in the sense of this. I'm at a red light, so my car is running. I've got it in park. We're stopped. I'm third car in line or wherever I'm positioned in the stack there. Can I, at that moment, legally, so, again, I'm not moving, look at my phone or do a text message or whatever?
Yes.
And again, there's legal, but then again, that light might turn green and I'm not moving when traffic starts to go because I'm still messing around with what I've got in my hand.
That's the problem.
That's where the issue is.
Right.
Right, okay.
And it's important to remember that, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's safe.
Correct, exactly. And I think that's one of the points we've definitely tried to drive home today and make people more aware of what they're doing. Any suggestions or tips you would say, and this could be from either one of you, when to maybe if someone's evaluating how their automobile or truck or whatever is set up, to think about, look, I've got a lot of distractions here that potentially could be a problem. Anything to think about that? You talked about stuff hanging from the rearview mirror, and I didn't know, I would not have thought that was a violation, but it makes perfect sense that it would be. People have dash cams. That are mounted, but again, sometimes those mounts fall. I can speak to mine. It's dropped down. Usually, it's when I come out after I've been away from the car for a while and it's hanging down there. But I get it. I'm more worried about fixing it up than I'm doing anything else. Not doing it while I'm driving, mind you. So we're okay there. But just some general advice about people to kind of maybe evaluate what their setup is. How would you kind of tackle that? Some of it could be simple. Some of it might be more situational. But I'm just thinking, really evaluating the kind of the configuration that you have.
Well, first and foremost, you should be doing that prior to leaving the home.
Correct.
Or wherever you are.
Right.
So start there. If let's say you're heading to someplace unfamiliar, try to learn that route before you leave.
Right.
make sure you have things like your phone set on vibrate or whatever. So, I mean, simple things that you would think people would just do normally.
Correct.
You'll find them doing in a vehicle when it's difficult to do in
Right.
other situations.
Correct.
So if you're driving, anything that you believe may be a distraction to you that will keep your eyes off the road, maybe you shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
If you didn't have time to eat breakfast, driving is not the time to do it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure,
So,
sure.
so it's just, things like that. I would suggest you consider before you leave the home,
Got it.
before you hop in your vehicle,
Right.
and especially as you get on the roadway.
So there's a big kind of two different categories here.
Mhm.
There's what your mindset is while you're driving,
Right.
and then there's your physical atmosphere while you're driving.
Correct.
So when we say get your mind straight,
Mhm.
we're talking about those things like where you put your glasses. Did you eat breakfast this morning? Did I type in the address to my destination before I started,
Right.
or do I have to do it once I start driving down the street? And the answer is you do it before you start.
That's right.
So then you have the physical atmosphere, and we talked about things that are hanging from a from a rearview mirror.
Right.
But you see sometimes people have, especially in work vehicles, stuff, paperwork,
Right.
Folders, binders, all this stuff on your dashboard.
Right.
I've even seen license plates on people's dashboards, which is a separate violation.
Right.
They need to make sure it's mounted on the front of the vehicle.
Correct.
But in the event of a crash, think about this for a minute.
Mhm.
If you're driving down Route 58
Mhm.
and that's a 60-mile-an-hour roadway,
Right.
and you get in a crash,
Mhm.
everything
On the
in that vehicle
That's right.
is going 60 miles an hour.
Yes.
Okay, so you may stop,
Mhm.
but all the things that are not attached to the car are not going to stop,
That's right.
and all of that stuff is going to come at you.
Mhm.
So if you have a binder, if you have a notepad, if you have stacks of mail, and all that stuff becomes a projectile, and it can cause serious injury.
Yes.
So not only those things in the physical atmosphere, but your passengers. When you're playing loud music and everybody's yelling and screaming in the car, that in itself could be a distraction to the driver. So
Right.
it's not just when you're driving by yourself,
Right.
but you have a responsibility as a driver to make sure that you're operating that vehicle safely on the roadway.
Mhm.
And if your physical atmosphere is affecting that safety, then you need to do something to make sure that you can change that as well.
To piggyback off that,
Sure.
as a contributor, seatbelts as well.
Mhm.
Yes.
If you're driving and you stop, you now become a projectile yourself.
That's right.
Similarly, your passengers as well. So that's also a consideration that you have to implement in your
Right, right.
driving.
And I would assume, the time to put the seatbelt on is not when you see a law enforcement officer coming down the road and you're
Right.
hurriedly trying to.
Right.
It's before you start the car.
Absolutely.
And get yourself situated then.
Absolutely.
Correct. I mean,
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you what I tell my family.
Sure.
Is the car doesn't come out of park until everyone's buckled up.
Right. Right.
That's the rule.
Mhm. So there's a lot of safety factors that get kind of rolled into this topic, and it kind of mushrooms out a little bit. And you mentioned family, and we talked about responsibility, and that's another thing where if you're a parent or a guardian for a young person, the best message or example to set is when you're doing the things right, because they're going to learn from you,
Right.
and they're going to think, well, if mom or dad can do it, I can do the same thing.
Especially child restraints. And
Yep.
and Sergeant Hudson and I collectively have been in law enforcement for more than 20 years, and we've seen a lot of bad crashes.
Right.
We've seen a lot of things that people shouldn't have to see. And one thing that the public can do to help us not have to see that is to make sure they're buckling up,
Right.
and make sure they're not driving while they're distracted, because those are things that you don't forget when you see those things.
That's right. And of course, once that's happened, it's all too late.
Absolutely.
All good intentions are gone at that point in
Right.
time,
And,
correct?
And no one wants to be responsible for an injury to their family member. And if you buckle up, then you should make sure that your kids are buckling up also, because you've made a decision as an adult to put that buckle on, and they may not know the recourse
Right.
of what may happen.
Correct.
So that you have a responsibility, and the driver under the code, the driver is responsible for that traffic citation if a passenger under the age of 17
Right.
or under the age of 18 does not have their restraint on.
Correct.
Got it. Got it. Well, before we close, I want to give you both a chance, sort of your sales pitch, if you will, to anybody that's watching this program, to our residents here in the city of Suffolk, is just to really implore them to utilize this month as a starting point if they haven't been doing the right things to do that. And of course, make it a habit to always do the right thing when it comes to eliminating distractions, being very self-aware of what's going on. Certainly, you know, pre-planning routes. Again, like we talked about, clear off the dashboard, all these things. Just sort of both of you, kind of your last message, if you will,
Final thoughts.
to keep things safe.
Well, my main point driving at home is that, you know, if we're setting a positive example for our children, then we're going to have generations to come that understand the importance of that safety measure, of not driving distracted and making sure you're buckling your seatbelt. It really comes down to an individual's decision, and it shouldn't just be the concern of whether or not I'm going to get a traffic citation.
Right.
It should be, I want to be safe. You know, I don't want to get in a car wreck. Consider the ramifications for your insurance company when the police report says that you weren't wearing your seatbelt or that you were playing with your phone.
Right.
Whether or not they're going to continue your coverage, you know, that's a separate point.
Sure.
But these are all things that, you know, driving on the roadways in our Commonwealth is a privilege, and that privilege can be taken away. And it's important for people to remember that to maintain the safety of our roadways and ensure that everyone's family gets home safe at the end of the day,
right.
They need to drive safely and not distracted.
Got it. Sergeant?
The things you learn in driving school shouldn't be forgotten. If you didn't buckle your seatbelt to get your license, you wouldn't get it. I mean, simple things like that you need to be implementing. That's every day. It doesn't stop. If you continue to operate on the roadway, continue to do the same things you did in driving school.
I don't think you'd sit there texting next to your driving instructor.
You sure wouldn't.
You might be a long time coming before you get the license in that situation or whatever. But
and just
sure.
one last thing is
Yes.
is that, you know, even though the passengers wouldn't be responsible for a citation, you know, it's their duty and responsibility to make sure that the operator is making sure that they're safe when they're in the vehicle.
Right.
And if you're a passenger in a vehicle and you see the driver pick up their phone, a lot of these manufacturers for the phones now have driving mode.
Right.
If you put it in driving mode, it won't ring.
Right.
It won't beep for the text messages. And in fact, on some of the phones, it'll send a message to the person who's calling you or sending you a text, and it says, "I'm driving right now.
Right.
I'll call you when I stop."
Correct.
So it's just as important for the passengers to make sure that the drivers are being safe.
Very true. Very true. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate your time today to get across a very important message, not just for April, but for year-round, when we're
All the
talking
time.
about distracted driving, to avoid it and be aware of really what's happening when you're operating a motor vehicle here in the city of Suffolk and beyond, because it's not just here in Suffolk, of course, that we're talking about. But again, appreciate your time today. That would do it for this edition of Safety First. I'm your host, Tim Kelly. We'll see you next time.